and welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Julia Trickey and I'm a botanical artist and tutor and have been for more than 25 years. But since the pandemic, I've also been hosting these talks, these botanical art focuses, where you get to meet leading botanical artists from all around the world. And the audience now also comes from all around the world. I'm really pleased to have you with me live. Those of you that are here live, do take the opportunity to put any questions in the Q&A box as need be. So this is going to be a whistle-stop tour of the speakers from 2025. I want to give you a bit of an overview of the content and the subjects that they've been talking about for the last year. And here you can see the main speakers. I'm going to share with you some short extracts and images from their talks. Now, this really is going to be just a speedy overview, but I hope this will give you an insight into the range of talks and the style of the content. So we will start with Billy Scholl. Now, Billy Scholl is a UK artist who runs a very successful online school teaching botanical art to hundreds of people. She came to speak to us about composition at the start of this year. And she gave us a little bit of background about her time as a fashion student and showed us also some of her early compositions. Now, here she's just going to explain to us how she rearranges and amends her compositions. I'm aware that Billy's audio may be a bit quiet, so you might need to turn this up.
Then one of the other things that I do is use a piece of tracing paper, and I try and work out what else I might want to add to it. So this flower in particular needs the stem put in the right place. So what I did was let me just do this with this piece of tracing paper. So I traced off one of the buds and the stem up there, and I slid it down and sort of roughly worked out where the back of the flower would be, and then continued the stem down from there. So that's how I worked out where my stem would be for my open flower. In hindsight, I should have sketched it in at the time, but I didn't. And then the next stage was to see what else I can do to sort of pull this together as a sort of a proper study of this flower. So if I put this tracing paper over here, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of where I'm going from here. So I have the same bulb. You can see I didn't manage to get it to flower this year, but it's produced a leaf. The leaf just continues and continues to grow. It seems to be like forever. So what I've done is I've drawn it up at an earlier stage, and I'm going to sort of mirror the buds here at the sort of bulb here, and put in a juvenile leaf and a sort of medium leaf. And what I do is I sketch onto this tracing paper what would fit with the composition, and then I make little notes as to what I'm going to do to add some detail, or whether I'm going to go colour or tone. And because we've got the grey shadows in the flower, I thought it'd be quite nice if we just do this in tone. So I'll just put a little sketch here to remind me. And then on here, because everything comes from green to tone, I'm going to do the same on this stem, go green to tone. So this is a really good way of doing it, and I'm sure a lot of you do it, but this is sort of post-painting. So this is how I get out of the hole that I've painted myself into, if you like. And the great thing about the tracing paper is that you can move it around and adjust and see what looks good, you know, and you know, you can even turn it around and try different angles with the leaf, or you know, you could sketch up a whole load of leaves on different pieces of paper and just move them around to get the right composition.
Jessica Daigle shared her portfolio of work with us. She works much drier than Billy Scholl, who uses a lot of wet washes. And Jessica particularly enjoys painting these aged stages of flowers, as do I. And you can see her wonderful work here. Let's listen to her as she demonstrates how she creates this narrative in texture.
Okay, so my favorite watercolor technique is the semi-dry brush stippling. So this one I use a lot for my to develop aged surfaces. So I begin with a wash layer, and then I am mindful of where my highlights are too, to not touch those. And then I use a semi-dry brush and I do a ton of dots in one first color, and then I'll overlay it with another color and do that many times until I've developed that shadow, or maybe in a large range of color that's in that area. So you can see that pretty well in the leaves that I did for the ghost pipe here. Okay, so here's a little example of how I do it. So you can see I did that initial wash, and then using stippling, I'll go through it and start to overlay my color on it with orange. That's my first color. Okay, so you get the idea. And then once those are in and dry, I then go through with either a richer color or just an additional color that's in that area, and I'll stipple over that as well. And then and it's not entirely dry, it's got a little wetness, and as it starts to dry, it has a teeny little bleed into the fibers, and I find that that's just enough. Okay, and then this is a sped up version of that, so you can get the whole idea a lot faster. And I did this a lot in those dried Rebeckias, and all of those leaves, I mean, it's several layers of dots.
Okay, so we're also going to meet Isabel Mischka. Isabel is an Austrian artist, and she also uses a dry brush technique. Her subject of choice is leaves, which she paints on vellum. So she showed us how she selects and mixes her color, and then how she applies these to the vellum, and also how she builds up her leaf portrait. I mean, where someone is just saying that the pictures for them are a bit blurry, it looks fine on my second screen. Let's carry on and see how we get on.
I think, and that's of course super personal, but when I try to create a convincing copy, I can't forget that I take a three-dimensional object and I portray it in a two-dimensional form. So to help me create the illusion of depth, I found that I just have to really exaggerate things. Lights, as bright as possible, even brighter, pure paper, vellum, shadows that are darker, endless hues of dark to get a lively, almost black, and then many different hues of color in the midtones. That's so important. If you have super dark areas, you need a lot of midtones and bright whites. This photo example is to show what I mean by that. So you have the original in the middle, enhanced on one side, dulled down on the other, and those lights and darks really need to pop to get it off the surface. Because, you know, we are losing one whole dimension and we have to make it up with something. And in my case, it's exaggerating everything. Also, I've had to develop my sense of seeing as much as I had to develop my skill of painting. Many of my students are super confused by all the different colors that I describe when I'm painting. But each hour that they get to know their plant more, they start to discover more and more of tones and details on it. And our eyes just start to sharpen and we get a sense of what we are looking for. Whenever I spot a new hue, like I said, I add it to my painting with the fanned out color palette, super handy. And on this dandelion here on vellum, natural vellum, it's a perfect example of how much color there is to explore. You have not just greens and yellows, you have deep burgundy, pink, purple, blue. So much fun to play with and so much fun to look at.
Another artist who is very fascinated by color is Sanji Morgi. It's a French girl. And she has developed her own way of creating harmonic shadows, which are different for each plant that she's depicting.
Every subject I paint has its own bespoke shadow mix. When I prepare the painting, I always paint color swatches in my sketchbook decided on the palette for my subject. And when that's done, I pick one yellow, one red and one blue from this palette, and these will make my harmonic shadows mix. So for example here, for that pansy, I had French ultramarine and quinacridone lilac to make my purple, and Hansa yellow deep for the center. And then I had other colors, but the blue, red and yellow together made that heavily textured, very dark, granulating gray that could also be diluted for the lighter parts in the pansy. I'm going to show you this one because I still have the original painting of this one. I had Nicolas yellow, quinacridone lilac and tallow blue red shade, and I made the gray with that. And that was the resulting painting. So all the shadows on that, whether it's on the spider or the blue flowers or the green leaf or the stalks, all the shadows are done with that mix that I mixed from a yellow, a red and a blue that I was going to use for the painting. Color is not the only criteria that I take into account when selecting the three primaries. Some pigments granulate and create heavy texture, while others are very fine and blend smoothly with other pigments. So for example, here for the pansy, I had French ultramarine because it's very granulating, and that gave me a very dark shadow mix with a lot of texture that gave the velvety texture of the pansy. But for this one, as a blue, I used tallow blue red shade because I didn't want granulation on my flowers.
I hope you're finding it really fascinating, the different ways that artists work and their different theories of painting. Alice Rosa is an Italian artist based now in the States, I think, and she trained as a conservator of old paintings and of artworks. And she explained to us how this is done. And then she went on to say that she'd been exploring this way of working when she came to take up botanical art, and she was sort of going to adapt this technique. And so she talked us through that. She uses coloured pencil, and you can see the layers of different colours here. But she was also interested in atmosphere and how to get depth in her painting. And she's just going to, we're just going to listen in now, and she talks a little bit about that.
But what I did with this picture is I tried to basically pull together everything that I had studied for, about getting depth and atmospheric perspective, and see if I could get it all together in one piece. And so that's how this piece, called As the Wind Drifted By, that's how it started. It was just like a fun concept to kind of play with. So actually, I'm going to talk about each single flower, but I want you to notice like the two kind of richer colors, like the purplish and the violet, kind of sit somewhat on the same plane, while I wanted the pink one to sit a little bit behind, as if they were two in front and one in the back. So this is the flower on the left, and I just want you to see, this is the petal that I was drawing before. This is why I was telling you that I was going with such darks, because I was going for the highest contrast I could get. That's why dark sepia was like my best ally in that moment. And I did use dark sepia quite a lot in here, like in this corner here, some of the darker areas are dark sepia. But I really wanted to have a lot of contrast and a lot of highlights in the front part of the flower, and a little bit less, just gradually less, in the back. Where you can see here, you can still see details, you can still see some contrast, obviously, some shading, but not as much. And the same I did here. I really wanted this petals, especially this very interesting burgundy and green petal, I really wanted it to come forward. And I did that having a lot of like real dark right under here and beautiful highlights. I was, true to the colors of the flower, but it did play to my advantage that there's some red in here that I could just use to, push it forward. And again, the same thing I did here. So there is some contrast in the back, but not as much as you would find down here. And this is again because I just reduced the contrast slightly and the saturation slightly. Actually, I should talk about, I try to get softer edges on these petals and in the previous one. So I was trying to slowly adapt it to trying to get depth among, like, and within each flower.
Okay, we'll leave that there. At the end of each year, we have great fun, excuse me, as I bring together 3 or more artists to compare notes, and we look at subjects such as their current projects, any guilty secrets they have in their artistic endeavors anyway, and or maybe a favorite piece of kit. So I've just picked out one answer from each artist in this case. So tell us about your background, and Lizzie Harper, you're just going to hear her answer to this question.
So just like the others, I've always been into natural history, and as a child I was encouraged by my parents to get out into the compost heap and see what was there and draw sketches and all that kind of stuff. Clearly I wasn't prompted to learn how to spell till a little later on, and I think possibly slightly glamorizing the life of your average frog and newt. However, it's just something that I was always into, and I went and did a zoology degree at Bristol, and after that I thought, well, my favorite part was drawing and the dissections, so I went to art college and I did a HND in natural history illustration. And while everybody else was doing beautiful big oils of like leopards at dawn and kind of, you know, sort of gorillas in the mist and all that stuff, I was painting weeds, really, which has always been my passion.
Lizzie always makes me smile. I also asked the 3 tutors, artists, about any alternative creative pursuits, and Sarah Marsh's reply was really interesting.
I like to think that we can have different branches to our creative practice at different times in our lives. And 2 years ago, I discovered tapestry weaving, and I came to realise that I underestimated when I started it how previous experience in other creative pursuits can influence the new sort of creative practice using a different media. My knowledge of colour theory and how important tone is has really helped. And you can see on the right a tonal strip that's been created with yarn, different blends, created just as we would if we were using graphite or pen and ink.
So a lovely second string to Sarah's bow. So I'm just going to play you a little bit of Christine Fashek's suggestions for top tips. We're just going to hear the last one that she mentioned.
My biggest top tip is find your people, find your peeps. So whether that is a botanical art society or a local circle or chapter, a society that relates to your medium or your subject matter, so lichenologists and bryophytologists and mycological people for me, herbaria, libraries, go find your subject matter somewhere and find the people that relate to it. And then find people that teach who enjoy what they're doing and aren't picking at you, basically. Find what brings you joy in social media and all those other things. And those are my tips.
Find your peeps. You could do this by joining a florilegia. Emma van Claveren came to talk to us about florilegia, which in my simplistic understanding is a group of artists who are associated with a particular place, painting the plants there. So Emma gave us quite a lot of history to florilegia before introducing to some of the groups, such as the Chelsea Physic Garden Florilegium, which actually I am a member of. There's a florilegium down at the Eden Project, which is in Cornwall, southwest of England, and there's a garden up in Sheffield that have a florilegium. and also Hampton Court Palace florilegium. So she spoke about these as well as ones further afield, such as the florilegium that is comes out of the Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney, Australia. So you could paint for a group, but you could also choose to paint for an exhibition. So one of the most prestigious exhibitions is the RHS Botanical Art and Photography Show. And though it is based in London, exhibitors come from all around the world to take part in this show. Now, Charlotte Brooks is curator of the show, and this is run very much in partnership with the Saatchi Gallery. During the talk, several of the 2025 exhibitors spoke about their plans, their processes, their preparations for the show, but Charlotte also highlighted examples of artwork.
So here I'm going to just sort of talk a little bit more about some of the examples here, and they're very, very different. We have to the far side the hellebores here by Juliette Rouse, and Juliette chose a very specific and tight theme, which meant that she was able to meet this really, really well. She was looking specifically at hellebores, so you really get that fabulous comparison of hellebores, different varieties, and how the pattern and the shape and the colour comes together, and really where the variety plays out in that form. The next one on the side there is one from the Korean botanical artist who chose to do a theme on the plants that have traditional cosmetic use. And so this again was a lovely theme and very different to anything we've seen. And the important thing here with a group exhibit was to get the paintings to work together as a set, because they're all by different artists, which they achieved brilliantly. And really that's a very difficult thing to do, and being able to pick such an unusual and engaging theme and then play that out across 6 pictures by different artists was really very impressive. The next artist was Manuel Zaro, who took a very personal theme, and we shall be hearing from him as well a little bit later, looking at Pinus sylvestris, growing in a specific and distinct national park in Spain. So really looking at the way in which these trees, quite iconic trees, really, you can see there the little figure he's included for scale, and how he was able to meet his brief by looking at a single genus and really looking and exploring in great detail at how that genus looks different according to slightly different growing seasons, different perspectives. Then we had a set of works from Bernard Carter called Spines and Thorns, and Bernard was looking there at the kind of the spines and the thorns and those prickly elements for the plant that gives it its protective nature. We then have works from Susan Tomlinson, and these are cultivated cotton varieties. And with Susan's work, she was again looking at a very tight theme. And actually, one of the important things about this set of works is that the way in which they pollinate and the seed dispersal depends on which variety they are. And they might disperse clockwise or anti-clockwise. And here you can see from this illustration that the seeds dispersed anti-clockwise. So part of that compositional arrangement was really very much telling the story that was part of her discussion in her artist text as well. And then finally, Kyoko Uchiyama with her lotus seeds, 2000 years slumber. And again, a very, very tight, very specific set of pictures looking at a particular variety and genus and what was important about them as they changed through the growing season, and that observation that really gives you a very rich story about this way the plant looks and how it changes over time.
So in case it wasn't clear, to exhibit at the exhibition at the RHS, you need to produce 6 paintings. So each of these paintings here represent another 5. You know, there are 6 paintings in all. Dalian Root, South African artist, exhibited with the RHS in 2024. and she came to talk to us about how she prepared for the exhibition. So I'm just going to quickly show you 3 of her 6 paintings before we hear from Dalian. So you can see they're incredibly detailed compositions. And she wanted to portray not only the plants, but the pollinators. This particular painting was actually awarded, as well as a gold medal, the best botanical artwork in the entire show. In this little clip, she's going to be talking about one of the pollinators.
Now, zooming in to our little star of the show, the pollinator is a horsefly. With studies, they found that the horsefly actually cannot distinguish between the Watsonia and the orchid. Now, remember, we said the orchid has no floral reward whatsoever, whereas the Watsonias, on the other hand, has large amounts of nectar. So the horsefly will go to the Watsonias, go to hundreds of visits and drink the nectar. As it visits them, the pollen of the Watsonia falls on its back. And then somewhere along the way, it will encounter the orchid. It will fly to the orchid, stick its tongue into the tube of the spur of the orchid, searching for nectar, but obviously not finding anything. But in the process, its proboscis, its tongue, brushes against the visidia, that little sticky pad, and as it flies away, it detaches the pollinia, which you now can see is hanging from its tongue. So it's so interesting, and how incredibly precise is this for this design, that the pollen from the Watsonia falls on the back, the pollinia from the orchid sticks to the tongue. So each is in its own very specific place, and never do you get a situation where the wrong pollen gets transferred to the wrong plant. Everything perfectly in place, and this little horsefly is in fact pollinating 2 species without even realizing what it's doing. In the final painting, I try to convey this scene of search and deception to show the mimicry. If you had no information, you would possibly think that it's all one and the same flower in abundance, but there's in fact only one orchid, and that's the one that the horsefly found. Everything else, all the other pink flowers, are Watsonias.
What a fascinating story behind this painting. Laura Silburn has exhibited several times at the RHS show and won many awards, including a set of fern paintings. So she was the obvious choice to illustrate a book on ferns. And this was the focus of her talk that I hosted with her. And here she's just going to explain her approach to painting these plants.
And I just wanted to note some of the characteristics of my approach to painting ferns, because it was something I came at it quite specifically with. I wanted to use aerial perspective to help capture the whole feel of the plant, as rather than, as is more commonly seen, just one frond. It's because they're so complex, and you want to see the features clearly. It's really understandable people do just one frond, but I wanted to show their value as garden plants, so I wanted to show the whole plant. So aerial perspective was one of the devices that I used to help show that. This is Diopteris sieboldii. This one I believe is used in the book as well. I'd also wanted to experiment with composition to fit larger ferns into the sequence without losing that whole plant effect. This is Diopteris cycadina. I captured cultivars in the paintings, so horticultural plants as well as wild species. This one is Diopteris affinis cristata. It's a cultivar, so it's one that you'll see in gardens, and this painting's now in the Shirley Sherwood collection. I think this one was used in the book as well. This one has a particularly fancy frond, and this is grown ornamentally, obviously, because it's a nice frilly garden plant. I'd also wanted to capture the base of the plant. So here, I don't know if I'm hoping you can see my cursor. So down here, capturing the fibrous roots, the leaf bases and the scales at the bottom of the fronds. They're quite important botanical details. And finally, I just wanted to clearly show the botanical details. So the life cycle of ferns, which is really amazing. Just wanted to include those and those little identifying features that would tell you about a specific plant or species.
So amazing paintings of fern there from Laura. Sue Wickerson spoke to us about choosing a subject for a particular exhibition. She wanted to paint an aspect of the date palm and eventually decided to paint a single open fruit. She explored and showed us how she used lighting to reveal the inner beauty of the date. You can see quite a difference between that previous slide and these. And here is her final painting, which I think is amazing. However, I'm going to show you a clip from Sue's talk, which will give you a bit of an insight into her process and also the scale and size of this painting. I expect most of you are not expecting the painting to be that big. Amazing image. The Irish artist Mary Dillon also talked about how she went about choosing a subject to paint. Now, Mary had the opportunity to spend some weeks at Oak Springs Garden Foundation in Virginia, the USA, as an artist in residence. So she took a painting to finish, this rhododendron painting, but she also wanted to take some time to depict a plant from Oak Springs.
And in spite of, you know, the vast collection of flowers and plants and trees and, you know, both wild and also in the formal garden, for some reason I kept going back to that damson plum. And so I chose it because I thought, you know, there's something about the light coming through the leaves and the kaleidoscope of colors in on the ripening plum that really kind of attracted me. And so getting set up, I suppose the first thing I really wanted to do was to have a look at it in the light and in the outdoor light, because one of the things I suppose, and anybody who's familiar with my work, you'll probably realize that I love when I'm making a piece of work, I love to make it look like it's actually alive, you know, and I wanted my painting of plums to look like they were actually still growing on the tree. And so I kind of made this arrangement, having really kind of, you know, observed the tree kind of as carefully as possible. And I set up this arrangement in my studio to make it look as if I was still kind of outside looking at the plums growing on the tree. So I had my specimens right in front of me, and then I explored kind of various different lighting so that I wanted to kind of make sure that I kept my lighting as consistent as possible. The first thing I always do when I'm making a painting is that I do, you know, after doing some initial kind of very close observational drawing, I start by doing some really quick gestural drawings. And it's only following that I will do a measured drawing and then a tonal drawing.
Okay, we will leave it there. I'm sure you'd like to see how this progresses. I've got this picture. I don't think it's a finished painting, but I think it's getting there. I want to just share with you a couple of speakers who are doing what I'm going to call a more involved or larger project. And this is Sharon Field. Sharon's project, called 3000 Days and Counting, started as a response to the climate change crisis when she vowed to do a drawing a day for 3000 days. I think she must be about halfway through this project. And here you can see one of the scrolls, one of the many scrolls that she's been working on. And I'm going to show you some detailed close-ups as well. If you ever get opportunity to see these in real life, please do, because I think it's botanical art history in the making. And her work has now been seen by and had an impact on many hundreds of people. Do look her up if you'd like to know more, because I'm just skimming over the detail here.
How has this artwork been created? Well, my supplies are very, very simple. I use Arches Hot Press 300 GSM or 140-pound weight watercolor paper, Pigma Micron pens, mainly 003 size, because I like the fineness I can get with those pens, and watercolor paint, and a variety of brands. I usually buy a very large roll of paper, which is about 9 meters or 30 feet long, which I then cut down into 3 strips of 37 centimeters or 14 inches wide. And all the drawings are done directly in pen. Not one plant has been pre-drawn in pencil. On the scrolls, I've recorded the details of everything. So on the actual scroll, each image has a reference number, which is counting down from 3000. And you can see there, if the number has an asterisk, it means that that's an Australian native plant or animal. And if there's no asterisk, it means that the subject is non-native to Australia. This information is also recorded in a journal, which you see on the right-hand side. This includes the image reference number in the left-hand column, the date it was drawn in the middle column, and in the right-hand column, the scientific and common names, a story about the subject, the location I sourced that subject, and if I have that information, I'll also include the weather for the day. And to date, I've completed 1 drawing a day continuously for almost 1,100 days. I work on the scrolls every day, no matter where I am or what I'm doing, even moving the house. So I have to do a drawing a day. So this can happen at home, when I'm visiting friends, traveling within Australia or overseas, in a hotel room, in a caravan, wherever I am.
Okay, that's all we've got time for, but do look Sharon Field up if you're intrigued by the nature of her project. Vlada Rapina is a Ukrainian artist who started a botanical diary, partly to give herself a focus and as a hobby, but over time it has turned into a true passion for her.
Oh, for me, Botanical Diary, it's maybe not just a collection of drawings, it's much more than, because it's my personal journey, a space where I can explore and capture the beauty of nature in all its forms. Through this diary, I can explore the structure of each plant, compare them, and understand how they evolve over time. And I appreciate the unique characteristics that make each one so special. And in a way, my botanical diary maybe is like a visual field guide. And I've always believed in the power of documentation and recording. And there is something special about being able to look back at a series of pages and see how far you've come. because a sketchbook or diary, as I call it, allows me not only to document what I see, but to track my progress over time. I mean, progress of drawings. And as an artist, this diary also helped me refine my skills because I spent countless maybe hours observing plants and drawing them in different stages of their growth. And with each sketch, I feel that I improved, and with each page, I became more confident in my abilities. So, for now, I would like to summarize everything I shared and highlight the key benefits of keeping a botanical journey. So, the first one is for sure connection with nature. This kind of diary brings me closer to nature by giving me a space to observe and appreciate plants in detail. And the next one is studying plants because it's not just about capturing their appearance, but about understanding their structure, growth patterns, and how they change over time. And for sure, it's improving drawing skills because through continuous drawing, I feel that my skills have improved over time, and I did my best to sum everything in this short slide.
You may notice that Vlada is working in graphite pencil, no colour, no watercolour. So I'm going to introduce you to some people now who came to speak to us who are not working in the classic watercolour media, such as Rhonda Nass. Now, Rhonda's also working in black and white, but she's creating drama with Scratchboard. Now, you may, like me, remember this is a childhood activity, but as you will see, there is nothing childish at all about Rhonda's work. So I'm going to show you a few of her Scratchboard images before she tells us a little bit about the process.
And vignetting less and less pressure. I have a spot there that was a flaw in the Scratchboard. Sometimes I make my own flaws, and you can use a black micron pen. It's archival ink, India ink again, and you can just dab where you need to. I don't like the looks of some of these strokes, so I'm just adding a little bit. I'm dabbing it with my finger, and very, very, very lightly going over it, because you can see how easily it took that one scratch when I tried remedying. So now I'm doing a little bit more to tweak this, and going a little bit further, lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter touch. So that by the time I get to the end, I've moved from tone, solid tone, to black Scratchboard seamlessly. So this is my drawing table with my items on it. Okay, I start by basically paint by number segments, and I do one layer. This is the clematis, of course, one layer of. Then I do more layers. On the left petal, you can see I'm trying to follow the direction of how the petal will fall. And you can see as I'm doing that petal that I've added layers to create that translucency on the bottom. Doing the same kind of step by step, and doing a little bit more on the central portion of the clematis. Here I've goobered up a lot of the bottom of this petal, and you can see I put much micron pen black ink on the top of it. So if you look, the same spot on where the top petal overlaps this petal, you'll be able to see, just follow that down, and you can't see any of the goobers anymore.
So how to correct mistakes? We all make them. Yeah, so I'm really pleased to be bringing you artists that are working in a slightly different way. And again, something completely different. Lawrence Hill is actually a photographer, and he came to tell us he tells botanical stories through his photographs. Let me show you some of his work. So you may think photography is much quicker than painting if you're an artist and you know how long watercolors take, but Lawrence would beg to differ.
Workflow. Well, I've been doing this, as Julia says, for more than 20 years. When it started, it was a hybrid. It was me photographing on film, 6x7 film, and then that was scanned and some post-production, digital post-production was done. That was many years ago. More recently, it's got more complicated. I deal with these very, very high resolution images. They're focus stacked, layer stacks. There's an awful lot of post-production goes into it. And here's the example of some of the earlier work. This file was 64 megabytes. And now, some years later, file sizes are often close to 800 or 900 megabytes, even a gigabyte. And you can see quite how much it's improved from these two examples. So this is Fritillaria persica, and you can see the difference in the images there. This is, again, part of my workflow. This shows a dissected flower that I had to take 20 different focus stacked images of. And here I've shown you how much of the post-production really counts. On the left, you can see a single image. The anther is quite out of focus. The filaments and the style are partly in focus. They're not bad. And the rear tepal you can barely see. Well, after it's been through Photoshop and you've done some work on it, you end up with this image in the middle, which is a little bit better, but it still has all sorts of errors. But when you spend 5, 6, sometimes many, many more hours on a single image, you end up with this beautiful, detailed, high resolution image, as you see on the right there.
Simon Williams, who is a popular botanical art tutor, showed us some of his gouache paintings that he has done historically. He also works in watercolor, but this talk was focusing on gouache. And so he gave us some tips and techniques when using this medium.
I'm a little bit on gouache now for the technical side of things, turning it around more into botanical illustration, and a very short video on how to apply the paint with a more detailed style. So one thing you mustn't do really is start off your colors too dark. So I've put a little example here, top side of a leaf and an underside of the leaf. Now it makes no sense to work opaquely on the back edge of the leaf. For example, you don't put this really dark green all over this back edge of the leaf and try to lighten it up, because you would just waste so much time and so much paint. So I've actually mixed the color to closely represent the back of that leaf, which is a slightly lighter limey green, and I've made the dark color a separate color as well. So I am making color differences at the start. This is what could happen if you don't take care. The colors can be very flat, very gaudy. They're very like dirty looking with the white paint. I've used too much white in this as an example, and it's just got no life to it. So this is a disadvantage of the paint. Now your color management in your palette is very important. So I mix out darks, mids and light colors all separately. The example on the right that shows the white and it says no, that's to say don't put your white paint into your dark color mixes or into your mid color mixes, because if you get stray white paint into any of your colors, you will never get that color back again. The white is so dominating, you might as well wash your palette off and start again. So keep your whites and keep your lights and your mids and your darks all separate, and don't put it on like it's thick toothpaste consistency. This is a bad move, and this is where a lot of people go wrong when they start out with gouache, because they think it's an opaque medium, so it must be applied really thickly. This is a no-no, because you'll get thickness, you'll get density, and you'll get tram lines in the paint, and then it just will be nasty to work on. So getting the consistency right, watering it down just enough so that it's like not too thick and it's not too thin.
Okay, if you're intrigued by Simon's use of gouache, he's going to be back later this year doing a step-by-step tutorial that you can follow along with. So keep an eye out for that. Anne Swan, to my mind, has been one of the main coloured pencil artists and tutors for many years. And she shared with us various ways of using graphite pencil over an initial coloured layer, so a specific sort of technique. I'll just show you a few of examples of her work before she explains the process a bit further.
Underpainting with graphite. So this is an early underpainting with graphite, January King cabbage. And so I just put all the colours down, and I've used different colours. I've used the fact that, again, that ivory colours resist darker colours on top. And once that's dry, which doesn't take long with solvent, you can just do a graphite drawing to describe the form and all the detail. And this, again, is a very early one. I think this one is in the Shirley Sherwood collection. So it's Brussels sprouts, and all the detail, all the form is done in graphite. So the underpainting is just a sort of pale limey green with some highlights. And then the rest of the detail is done on top in graphite. Now, one of the important things when doing this technique, you very rarely, well, you don't get strong color. Because you're diluting the color. And as I said earlier, the paper will only take so much pigment. And if you apply more, it just wipes off. So if you're doing this technique, you have to accept the fact that it's not going to produce bright color. If you want bright color, then you have to go back to doing the, sort of pure color pencil. And quite often you're tempted to add a bit of extra color on top. And then it no longer becomes a graphite drawing over an underpainting. The graphite then behaves like a grey. It's a grey pencil, and it gets absorbed into the colour, and you've lost the point of doing a graphite drawing over the top. But it's very suited to these sort of more subtle coloured ways, so the autumnal seed pods, dead leaves, bark, these dead teasels. It was a really nice way to describe them because they haven't got strong color. You can use these subtle colors and then do all that interesting form on top with graphite. So it combines color and graphite. And again, these beech leaves, the perfect things to draw in this technique.
So there's a different idea for you. Now we're actually going to head off to Vietnam, where Lai Nguyen talked about the tradition of painting on silk, which until relatively recently, for her at least, was much more readily available than paper. So she showed us some historical examples. I've just got one slide here from China. So these are peony paintings on silk. And she talked a little bit about the surface quality and texture of silk, and how she went about working on it. Here you can see the difference between painting on silk, which is on the left, and painting on paper on the right. So you get a different finish, as it were. And you can see the same here. At the top you've got paper, and at the bottom you've got the watercolour on silk. I'm going to just show you some of her work in progress shots, and then the final painting here. Again, this is on silk, and then just one last painting from Lai. So very fascinating, completely different way of working again, but still accurate plant portraits. And now we're going to go back in history. We're going to go back 300 years. Deborah Lankin talk was focused on Mary Delaney. As you can see, she lived in the 1700s. And Mary was in her 70s when she started creating the images that perhaps she is renowned for now, such as these. And these are not paintings, these are paper cutouts. I'll show you some close-up images. You can see she used a range of papers, some more successfully than others, and you can see some of the glue that she used. But let's just hear how she got started in this style of work.
So sometime in around the 1770s, Mary Delaney picked up a scissors, and instead of cutting out, portraits of people, she picked up a piece of color paper, and there was a flower, and she started cutting a flower. And she wrote in her letters she had invented a new way of imitating flowers. The earliest ones I've found are 1773. And you can see on the left, there's a geranium. So I like to think that that could have been her first one. These are the earliest I could find, the two of them. They're the only ones that show different species of plants on one piece of paper. And the paper she has used is different. It's a bit wrinkled. The paper was quite thin. So I like to think that these were early ones where she was just learning what she was doing. She wasn't accomplished as she did become later on.
I love the idea of someone in their 70s in a new hobby and inventing a new way of imitating flowers. To end this overview, I must mention the Botanical Art Worldwide project. Countries from all around the world coordinated simultaneous exhibitions of botanical art around May time, based around the topic of crop diversity. Celebrating crops that have been closely associated with the human species over thousands of years. For the talk that I hosted, I actually focused on the UK entry, which was entitled Looking Back for Our Future. And you can see some of the paintings that were entered for the UK exhibition at the bottom. Several of the exhibiting artists actually joined me for this talk to share the stories behind their artwork. Now, there isn't time to show you these works in progress, but I have got some examples, just half a dozen examples to show you of their final artwork. This last, I was going to say painting, but it's coloured pencil, by Carmen Lyons, was used for the publicity for the UK, excluding Scotland, Exhibition Scotland did their own thing. So there we are. That's a whistle-stop tour of last year's talks. I hope you've enjoyed the snippets. If so, do consider joining me this year for some of the full-length talks. Although if you do enjoy the short freebies, there are some more on my website. I'm just going to, as we finish, we're just on the hour now, I'm going to show you the names of the people that I've already booked for this coming year. You'll notice some of these names are in pink, and that is because I want to introduce some new features this year, and including tutorial talks. So all the people in pink are people that are running tutorials. So these can be watched in the usual way, but they're going to take you from start to finish through a subject, an idea or focus, and it gives you a chance, a taster of how the tutor's style of teaching, and it will be accompanied by materials lists and notes, and you could follow along in the weeks following the live event. I would also really like to showcase botanical art by those of you that attend regularly at the end of some of the talks this year. It doesn't matter what standard you are. You'll be able to put a little paragraph saying I'm a beginner, but I really enjoy painting daisies, whatever it might be. So look out for the submit here links at the bottom each of the talk invite. So do join me this year if you can, and if not, just thank you for being here and thank you for just attending this taster. As we finish, I'm just going to flash before you exciting topics to come, but I will just quickly check the Q&A. If you have any questions, I can't answer on behalf of artists. Okay, I can just see people have found it inspiring just to see these little snippets. But yes, if you have any questions, email me, go on my website, see what's coming up. So I'm just going to flash again before you the topics that are coming in for the next 6 months. Do watch to the end. I work really hard to bring you a quality product, but this is on Zoom and there are inevitable mistakes and there are occasional bloopers. And I'm going to end the session with a recording, a little snippet of one of my favorite bloopers. It's great to just laugh at yourself sometimes, isn't it? So here we go. Thank you for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you sometime again this year. Awarded in 2023 the Jill Smithies Award for Botanical Illustration, and that was given to her at the Linnaeum. That was given to her by the Linnaeum. I shouldn't think about it. Linnaeum. I can't even say it, Sue. I can't say it. That's it. She's going to have to tell you.